Greetings, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Mariana Garcia. I'm the Public Programs and Exhibits Manager at the Connecticut Democracy Center at CTOldStateHouse, and I want to welcome you all to our second program for Civics Learning Week, Educate, Empower, Engage, a conversation on the lasting impact of civic education. Civic Learning Week is a national effort to prioritize civic education to strengthen our democracy. It brings together students, educators, policymakers, and leaders in the public and private sectors to highlight the movement for civic education in states and communities around the nation. Governor Ned Lamont has officially proclaimed this week Civic Learning Week in Connecticut, and Secretary of the State Stephanie Thomas has issued an official citation honoring all the people and groups in Connecticut who help elevate civic education throughout the state. The Connecticut Democracy Center is a proud partner of Civics Learning Week, and to celebrate, we are offering a variety of virtual and in-person civics programs, exhibits, and resources for all audiences from March 11th through the 16th, including this panel discussion here today. And for more information on everything we will be doing this week for Civics Education Week, please do check out our website, and it's right here on screen right now, and you can see a schedule of all the upcoming programs and offerings we will be having, and also a bunch of online resources for educators and for students, and as well as a link to the National Civic Learning Week webpage. But today we are joined by some very special guests: Secretary of the State Stephanie Thomas, Connecticut Commissioner of Education Charlene Russell-Tucker, and Connecticut's first ever Kid Governor Elena Tipton. So they will be sharing their civics journeys with us today, starting with their earliest moments of civic education. And throughout their stories, we'll explore the importance of civics learning, youth participation in our communities, developing leadership skills, and how all of that can empower us to build a future where any voice can make a difference. And this is Civics Learning Week, but it's also Women's History Month, right? So I'm very excited to have such awesome women with us today to tell us their stories. So thank you all for joining us today. We're going to have a very good discussion here. And anybody who has any questions throughout the program, please do make sure to post them in the chat, and we will hopefully have time to take a look at them at the very end of our conversation. So ladies, are you ready? Okay, so we have a couple of questions for you. I would like to start one directed to Secretary Thomas and Commissioner Russell-Tucker. What is your job, and what is it you do? What does your job entail in the state government? The commissioner would like to begin.
All right, I will get started first. I was going to have my secretary begin, but Mariana, thank you so much. And it's just awesome to be here with you, with Secretary Thomas, with Elena, our first Kid Governor. It is just awesome to join. And for those of you watching, and this being a week to celebrate civics, I am so pleased to be here with you. And so to specifically answer your question, I serve as the Commissioner of Education for the state of Connecticut. I was appointed by our governor, Ned Lamont, in 2021. And so what does the Commissioner of Education do? In short, lead Connecticut's public education system, as well as serve as the Chief Administrative Officer for our Department of Education in accordance with policies established by our State Board of Education. But I'd like to bring into context when I say I lead the public education system in our state, just to give everyone context. I always appreciate doing this. We have 201 school districts across the state. That includes charter schools. In our state, the last data count, 512,652 students. And of these 500,000 plus students, a lot of people don't recognize that 53%, about 275,000, represent as students of color. We have about 92,000 who are students with disabilities, about 54,000 and growing are English learners, multilingual learners in our state. And, we have about over 180 languages spoken. And so when we talk about our public education system, that is the context and that is what we're talking about. And so I serve in that role so we can all work together to ensure that public education in Connecticut is world-class and that every one of those students that we talk about have access to those, to our systems, our awesome systems. and to make sure that they're improved as well as we go forward. I also work with other state agencies like our secretary here, our constitutional officer, and we work with all our school districts, as I mentioned, our policymakers who make policies for education. So we ensure that we're abiding by all the rules and all the laws that they make. And then there's other times when I get to represent the state, even on the national stage. I am pleased to have testified in Congress twice, talking about the work that we're doing in Connecticut. And so ultimately, I really feel honored to be able to do this work in our state, to represent all of you that may be watching, but supporting all our learners to make sure, as I said, education is world class in the state of Connecticut. So with that, I'll turn it to Secretary Thomas.
Well, I am so happy to be here, but during Civic Learning Week, I felt I had to yield to the Commissioner of Education. The Secretary of the State, we do so many things, we do not have enough time to cover it, but there's two main things we do. We serve as the institution where if you're registering a business or a nonprofit, you are interacting with our office. And the commissioner had some great data, so now I feel compelled. We have almost 500,000 entities registered here in Connecticut. This time of year, when many entities have to file annual reports, we are in constant communication with members of the public, and every single week from January through March, we are sifting through as many as 1,500 emails and phone calls a week with questions. And the second thing we do that is in the headlines these days, we oversee the administration of our elections. And we work directly with the registrars of voters and town clerks in every town to make sure our elections are safe, secure, following state and federal law. We work with over 500 people who are 2 registrars in every town and a town clerk in every town. We also answer questions posed by the public. We also work with the legislative branch in making recommendations around how to make our election process safer and more secure, clear up any inconsistencies in the law. And then, of course, we work with many agencies who are empowered to serve as voter registration agencies, making sure that they have all the tools and information that they need for anyone who walks through their doors and would like to register to vote. And I will stop there, but we also are the repository of many documents for the state.
Thank you so much, Secretary and Commissioner as well. And Elena, now turning to you. Elena, you are a very first elected Kid Governor here in Connecticut. And Kid Governor is a program geared towards 5th graders where they elect their very own Kid Governor. They have a statewide election, they have nominees, they have candidates, and then they have a real election where a Kid Governor is elected, and they will have a 1-year term. And Elena was our very first elected Kid Governor. And Elena, I would love to hear a little bit about yourself and also what your experience was like as the first Kid Governor in Connecticut.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elena. I was Connecticut's very first Kid Governor, as was mentioned before, and I was elected in 2015, and my term was 1 year throughout 2016. My campaign was for kindness. So the Kid Governor program has it structured super nicely. So you make 3 points, you run a platform, you get voted by the 5th graders across the state. And currently I'm a freshman at UConn. I'm just finishing up my first year there, and I'm studying statistical sciences. And as mentioned before, the Kid Governor program, when I was elected, was a pilot program. So it was the very first year. And the staff at Kid Governor, Mr. C, Ms. Whipple, and all the people who worked behind the scenes worked tirelessly to provide me with so many opportunities, such as speaking at the Women's Hall of Fame banquet, going on a library tour, and speaking with youth and adults all throughout Connecticut. They set up a meeting with me with the past governor and the current governor at the time. Governor Malloy. They also, provided me with so many more opportunities to speak. I got to meet the National Teacher of the Year, Johanna Hayes, which was an amazing experience for me. And aside from all of the, media stuff and all the things that people saw on the outside, they also just provided me a space to express my voice and to have a voice as youth in Connecticut. I think often, not even just in Connecticut, throughout the world, I think often our voices can be quieted. Like, you don't have enough experience to be speaking your opinion. Your opinion is invalid. But the staff at the Kid Governor program and through my term really pushed for me to speak everything that I believed in and to fight for what I believed in, and showed me that I can have a leadership role no matter my age, no matter where I come from, and that what I'm saying is valid. So yeah, that was my experience as Kid Governor.
Thank you so much, Elena. Well, clearly, all of you are seasoned pros at civics engagement, and I would just like to hear from each of you. This is directed to all three of you. What comes to your mind when you hear the word civics? Would you like to go in the same order that we did before?
I'll mix it up. I'll jump.
All right.
I spend a lot of time talking about civics. For me, it's more about, most people think voting, and I always say that's the beginning, not the end. So for me, when I hear civics, I think about how it relates to an individual's role in their community and also in government. It's a way of knowing that I, as an individual, have agency, that I have a role in the world around me, in terms of community and government. I'll stop there, but just finding my place in the broader infrastructure of society.
And I'll add to that, and also bring in what Elena said earlier about voice and agency, and knowing that what you do matter. And that really is important. And as the secretary said, it really is about finding your place and your space, and recognizing that there is power in a voice. Yes, it may start with one voice, may not end there. And so being able to recognize that matters, and being empowered to be able to do that. So some of what Elena said really resonated about being able to have a voice in the things that you do. And so many, we'll talk about it further, but in so many times, folks don't recognize that you can and indeed make a difference and just get the courage to speak.
And I'd love to jump in and kind of go off what these ladies said. I think a big part of understanding your voice and to be able to have a voice in our world and in our society and in each individual community that we're all a part of is to understand the actual structures of the government, and to understand, I feel like, as the secretary said, so much of it that comes to the media and that people really think of when they think of their voice is voting. But to understand that, there's little steps that you can take where your voice will be more efficient and can go further than just going to the people who you see the most. So yeah, that's what I really think of when I hear civics.
Wonderful. And I think we would all agree here that one of the most important things in feeling this way and understanding civics in this way is our education and our civics education that we receive in schools, in our communities, in our homes. And I would just like for all of you to share with us what your earliest memory of civics education or civics engagement was. What was that moment, or that maybe that class, or that experience that led you to see civics the way you do, and pretty much put you in the path that got you to where you are today?
So I'll start there with that. And you know how you get drawn to certain things at certain points. Very, very early on, for me, I just got drawn to my teachers. And it didn't matter what grade, but drawn to teachers and to teaching. And so, yes, I was the one who would go home and reteach whatever I learned to whomever would listen. That all, ended up being able to provide tutoring. And of course, we didn't think of that at the time, but was helping my classmates and others to understand when something they didn't grasp. But it was this constant, at the end of each day, I was going to reteach that lesson because I was so drawn to my teachers and all of that. And so here I am today. However, it goes back to the concept of being drawn into and not being intimidated by your voice, and every little thing matters. And so, again, going back to what can you do to help to make a difference, starting very closely in community was really important. But for me, it was, certainly didn't think about it as civics, but it was a matter of helping others. And in this case, it was in the education space, trying to help my classmates. But as I said, if you stood up long enough, you were going to hear the day's lesson we taught.
I can go next. My earliest memory of civics might be like the obvious answer, but when I was running for Kid Governor and I first heard about the program, like up until then, you could ask me what the 3 branches of the government were, and I probably would have been like, not too sure. It wasn't really taught civics when I was growing up in like K through 4th grade, but once I got to 5th grade and once I became a part of that program, even before I was elected, but when I was running for Kid Governor and when I was learning about all of the different structures, that is, the first memory that I have of civic education.
I thought my answer might be different, which is why I wanted my co-panelists to go first. I certainly always believed in community and helping people prior to getting in government. I worked for the nonprofit sector for several decades. So that was in my DNA, but I never thought of that as civics. So my first, what I considered civics lesson, if you will, was in school, social studies, learning about, Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, like all of these history-based civic lessons. And I think it had the unintended effect that I, as a young person, felt that was so far removed from my everyday life, my experiences up to that point, where I did not feel that many bodies represented my family or me. So I was sort of like hands off civics because of that experience. And I was, which is why I think it's so important, like programs like Kid Governor that take a broader approach, or like the curriculum suggestions through the State Department of Education that really center civics in the community. It's so important because it is a much broader topic. And I think if I could go back and talk to my young self, I would have said, okay, these lessons are only part of it, but there's so much more, which is why I'm happy we have Civic Learning Week and we're doing this program.
Thank you so much, all of you. And Secretary, speaking of that, so much more that you allude to, that these experiences, these moments that informed you in your youth, what impact do you think that had in the rest of your lives? Like, did it lead to other experiences? And what do you think that moment led to after?
I mean, honestly, I was pretty jaded until a very late age. I was jaded because I didn't understand the process. And it's why I spend so much time speaking to young people in particular, but also people of all ages. We as individuals tend to think of life as issues, whereas government is not organized that way. Government is very siloed. It's divided between local, state, and federal. So I was jaded because I felt like I didn't see movement on issues that mattered to me. And that ultimately is what led me to the nonprofit sector, because I thought I could solve some of those issues that way. But I tell young people and all people all the time, like, okay, if your issue happens to be climate, offsetting climate change, are you talking local issue where you need to go to the town ordinance about pesticide usage? Is it state issue where you want the transportation committee to change all state-owned vehicles to electric vehicles? Is it federal standards? So just understanding that government is very siloed would have made me perhaps more optimistic, because I would have chosen one level of government and really applied myself in that one place, versus just feeling overwhelmed and like my voice didn't matter because I didn't see movement on the whole.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to say it. Like, it helps it not seem so overwhelming, as you said, and more approachable if you look at it like an issue space. Like, it helps you engage with government and civics if you approach it that way, I think. Commissioner Elena, is there anything you would like to add if your experiences led to anything else?
And so the secretary talked about going into the private sector, and my draw was to the public sector. Having what I mentioned before is earlier, always wanted to go in and help, and to also empower others. A part of that came into being around, and we'll talk about experiential civics, right? And getting engaged. Always wanted to be engaged, and I thought the place to try to do that, to make a difference, was in government. And so landed here, but always thinking about how do we empower others' voices, and to say you can make a difference. And sometimes you have to be a part of the inside of that in order to understand it, so you can empower others as to how they can engage the system and the process. So for me, it was public service was where I ended up in this space. Spent some time, as well as 17 years as adjunct faculty in higher education, and the entire time working with students about what is it that you want to see change, and how do you make sure that change can happen, and how do you fight for, and this is a quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is like, how do you fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that lead others to join you? So always helping folks navigate that space is something that kind of led my journey, led me to that point.
I think for me, being Kid Governor, is kind of talked about again by both of these ladies. Although, I did have a little bit of a bigger role as a youth, it taught me to listen, and a really big part of fighting for what you believe in and making change happen is to listen to the people that you're fighting for, and to the people who might, have a difference in opinion as you, but to not let that silence your voice. So that's kind of the impact that it had on me.
So, Mariana, I don't want to mix things up a bit, but I feel like I need to connect to something that Elena said, because talking about your younger self and all of that, what she just said is so key, and I'd like to think that adults can learn from that as well. And I often think about, seek first to understand, and then to be understood, and that truly is practicing effective listening. Right, so we can hear and understand where we are at, because that to me is then, even though there may be differences of opinion, but we can find common ground if we become really, really good listening to each other, so that we can have better conversations and dialogue and working together. So I wanted to just connect to that. I'm sure the secretary may need to add to that as well, but coming from you, stating that really is important, and a lesson in civics that we can all talk about.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, well, I do have a couple of questions directed to one in specific of you, Commissioner Russell-Tucker. How can early civic education cultivate a culture of civic responsibility and active civic participation?
Another great question. When we talk about begin early, and so many times when you talk about civics education must begin at an early age. We know sometimes we think about middle school, but I really do believe it can begin earlier. And we may not be talking about formal civics education, although it can be that as well. But developing the habits of mind, making decisions collectively, can start with class rules or class contact for the year, making decisions about something that's a collective good for the community in which we're in. And that all can be a part of the early years in school, is acting in the best interests of others in our community. Again, it could be a class, it could be the school community, and then you can branch out to what's happening in the community at large. And so it really is an emphasis, as well as we talk about developing critical thinking skills, which we know is so essential for 21st century skills and 21st century learning. So it really is important when we think about this that we don't wait in our schools to get started, but this can start as early on in our kindergarten, really elementary school, to develop the habits of mind that can certainly foster where we end up. Look at Elena and what she's done, right? The earlier you start, the better.
Well said. Thank you so much. And now, Secretary Thomas, one question for you. But maybe the commissioner would also like to weigh in on this. What are you and your office doing to prioritize civics education in Connecticut?
It's a good question. I do like to always point out, I feel like a broken record and I feel badly saying it, but I think it's important for people to understand that our office does not actually have funding dedicated to civic education or public education and public outreach. So we try to do that work through existing positions, to sort of spread more civic awareness. So we are doing everything we can. I felt it was important when I was elected to do two things. One, make sure we were not just focused on K through 12. So many adults have only had one civics class in their entire life, if that. And they also need education. Two, I wanted to try to demystify the process and make sure that we could put out materials in plain English, but also try to get as many materials translated into Spanish as possible. We hope to be able to do other languages moving forward. So we have done that. We have a great platform called civics101.ct.gov. And by April 1st, we are putting out something we call internally the power of civics, because there is great power in being civically engaged. So people always ask me, what else can we do, like other than voting? So we sat around the office, we brainstormed. I think it's like 40 different things, whether you have 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 years, whether you're 8 years old or 80 years old, a bunch of things that every single person can do to be more civically engaged. And we're writing great detail about each. We are in the process of getting it designed and put together in a way that is easily understood. And we'll be launching that on our website, same website, Civics 101, by April 1st.
And I'll jump into that, and so appreciate hearing that, Secretary, because you've said something which is so important, that we have adults, right? We're focused on K-12 or K-12 education system when I talk about that, but you're so right. I know I engage in conversations with adults sometimes who don't even quite understand how all this works. So I so appreciate that you're doing that as well. A lot of things happening, as you can well imagine, at the department, recognizing the value and importance of civics education. We've work together with the Democracy Center, of course, with the secretary here in our Red, White, and Blue Schools program, which is so important that we do every year as well. And we have a state board of education. I mentioned that earlier. They have a 5-year strategic plan. And right embedded in our plan is to ensure all Connecticut learners acquire the skills and knowledge they will need to succeed in college, career, and civic life. And so we have some plans that's a part of that to ensure that we're doing that, including creating opportunities for students to explore multiple career pathways in their education journey. We also just approved our state board and we released our social studies standards that include civic education at every grade level, K through 12. And we have a social studies curriculum that will also be released shortly as well for K-8. So that is really important. But I'm excited to share, I know we have Elena here, first year at UConn, but I'm so excited that we did an initiative here in Connecticut, first of its kind in the nation, that we call Voice for Change, which was giving our high schoolers the opportunity to submit proposals as to how we were spending some of our federal relief funds, how they would invest it to reimagine Connecticut schools, and they could have gotten up to $20,000 each for a project. And it was really awesome. We had over 200 proposals across the state. The students did 2 weeks of campaigning that they did. We had a day of the vote that, there were campaign rules. There were things they could or couldn't do when they were campaigning for their projects to have it voted on. And we were really so excited. The governor, the lieutenant governor, we went out to districts, saw the students. They were really, really excited. The project involved over nearly 50,000 students lifting up their voice and really working on projects to assist sometimes the external community, their peers in school, in the school community, and really excited to see those come to life. This year, we've been going last year and seeing the projects that are coming to life out of that. So Voice for Change was one of those that we talk about. It's got national attention, but it's giving our students voice and agency and also giving them the resources that they needed to bring those projects to life. So I'll pause there, but those are the things that we're really excited about where our students had a voice for change, along with everything else that we're doing in this space, but really excited to share that with you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And Elena, I have a question for you, and it's a big question because you might be giving some advice to the commissioner and the secretary now, but what is it that can motivate young people to stay active in their communities and be civically engaged?
The first thing that comes to my mind is validation, and I think that is kind of a general life thing. To motivate anybody is to validate them and to validate what they're saying, even if you don't agree with it, even if it's something that's so small that you're not even going through the back of your head. But for people with more power and with bigger leadership roles to listen to youth and to understand that their opinions and their thought processes are so different than older people in our community and throughout our state is so important. And I can speak personally, like at UConn, I know right now there is a lot of students who are very frustrated with, some of the tuition raises that are happening as college is very expensive. And there was, a bus put together for students by UConn to go to the Capitol to talk about and to express their opinions. So UConn validating that and getting them that transportation and pushing for them to express their opinions is something that is super motivating to continue to speak out. Obviously in world and in life, there's 1,000 no's before you get one yes. And I'm sure both of you guys can attest to that, especially within your jobs and within your roles. But whether or not you may agree with what youth are saying and what young adults are saying, but to really sit back and say, I hear you, I'm listening to you, your opinion matters, what you're saying is important and it's valid, and let me work with you is super motivating to just continue to fight for what we believe in.
Very well said, Elena. Thank you so much. Okay, so here's a question for all three of you. How does experiential civics education prepare young people to become and remain civically engaged?
I can start off. I think for me, getting that experience creates one of the most important things for, general success is connections. And in order to get your voice heard, in order to make change, you need to have connections. So for me, I have these connections at the Old State House and through the Connecticut Democracy Center, especially with Mr. C. Like, we worked together super closely throughout my term and even throughout the past almost 10 years. It's been almost 10 years since I was Kid Governor. He's been able to really aid me in really whatever I bring to him. And that's because I had that experience within civics and was able to create that connection and to create that bond and almost that trust where, Mr. C really listens to me. And as I said before, validates my opinion. So by having those experiences, it can really elevate that and continue, individual students' journey in civics.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I'm definitely not in pedagogy, so I can't wait to hear what the commissioner has to say. But I think having experiential learning in any area builds confidence. It gives you practice, seeing how something works. You have, it's hands-on. And I think that is one of the best ways to learn anything. You can also, see what works, see what doesn't work, and sort of hone your craft, as it were. And civic education and civic engagement, it builds skills that are just good in life, whether it's in school, in a job, in a relationship, as Elena, talked about, being able to validate and have conversations and civil discourse and figuring out how to solve a problem. These are skills that you can't go wrong having no matter what you're doing. So I think more experiential learning, like the trip to the Capitol that UConn helped happen, just having that experience will make everyone who went on that trip or who knew about that trip more or better positioned to engage with their government moving forward.
And you did just fine with that, which really is so important because it is putting civics in action, right? It's really what it comes down to. We tell students to take informed action, which is what the inquiry arc of social studies we talk is all about. Take action, right? Get informed, take action, and you can always do that, which is really important. So it also makes the learning, right, much more connected to what it is that you want to do. So it keeps our young people also engaged. Elena's a great example as Kid Governor being exposed to civics participation. And that's what we're really seeing and asking students to do. Students across the state, young people remaining engaged. We see that through the Lieutenant Governor. She has a computing challenge, having students to develop how to solve real life problems in this challenge. And we see them doing awesome things. The same thing I mentioned for Voice for Change, where it's right, you voted, you do all of that, but you're also making a difference becoming difference makers and leaders, even at this stage, really carries you to the next stage of your life. So that really is what we're talking about. And the secretary said, you have that for life, right? And a civically engaged adult, right, starts there. And for everything that we're looking to accomplish in our society, that really is what we're all about. But it really gets started there, getting those experiences, being able to make a difference, putting civics in action is really important.
Thank you so much. All right, and throughout all of our conversation, we've been talking about the importance of early civic education, how we can get the youth to be more civically engaged, what the state is doing to get students more civically engaged, but what are the benefits of having young people involved in their community and in civics?
I would, I was going to say stronger communities, right? At the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about. It's so many times, it's waiting for others to come in to fix issues, and that's also a part of what happens. But how can you assess what is happening around you and to become a part of that change? And that really is important in getting, just becoming involved in the community and finding ways to do that. But I interrupted the secretary.
Quite all right. Well said. I just wanted to touch on something we haven't talked about yet. And I think you're never too young to learn the difference between politics and governance. And I think the concepts have gotten so conflated in sort of the national narrative at this point. And I see young people, old people backing away from governance because they equate it with politics. So learning that civics is related to your community and the way government occurs, happens, intersects with your life. I always tell people we are governed in almost everything we do, which is very different from politics. When I'm running for election, I'm a politician. I am elected as secretary, so now I govern, right? And I do have some control over some things that you may experience. And wouldn't you rather I have input from you as I make my decisions? And definitely lawmaking bodies definitely need that input. So I encourage young people to start making that difference between the two.
Is there anything you would like to add, Elena?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to add in. I think another big benefit of young people and young adults and children, youth being involved in their communities is it allows them to understand other communities better. So speaking from experience, I grew up in East Hartford, where the demographics are predominantly Black and Hispanic students. And being involved within my East Hartford community allowed me to better understand, especially throughout high school. I went to high school. I graduated last year, but in 2020, when there was, a lot of things happening that I'm sure all of us in this meet know about, but being involved in my East Hartford community allowed me to listen and better understand what my Black and Hispanic peers were going through at that time in order to understand my role in society and understand how I can use my privilege, as a white woman, as a white, student who has, who grew up in East Hartford to better, not necessarily advocate, but to help, aid their opinions, as I said before, and to step back and to listen.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I would add to that, the best way to prepare a future for the youth is to have the youth involved in the conversations that are building that future, right? So I think that's one of the most important things as well, to have the youth involved in those conversations. But Secretary Thomas, as you well explained earlier in the program, one of your jobs is to coordinate elections, keep track of all the voters in Connecticut, and could you share with us to what degree the Connecticut residents that are young, below 30, are how well are they engaged in elections and civics, and can it be improved? And how can we improve it? I'm sorry.
It's hard to know, and I apologize. I did not realize that data was made, so I didn't pull it. But I don't need to pull it to know that it's not great, because in municipal elections in general, across all ages, we only see on average 32% turnout. So every other year, average 32%. There are many towns where it's under 12%, under 10% turnout. In state elections and some federal, we only see about 53% turnout. But in presidential elections, we see closer to 80%. And that is abysmal, right? Because, without even getting into is everyone who's eligible to vote voting and other voting rights issues, that tells me that there are 80% of eligible voters who see fit to go to the poll on election day to vote for president. But those same people who are already registered, who obviously think voting's important enough to show up for, choose not to show up for all the other elections. And anecdotally, I will say that those numbers are probably slightly lower for young people. What I think can be done, I think part of the issue has to do with public education and the lack thereof. Right now, in Connecticut, most information about elections are communicated by political parties and political candidates. And that's fine, but depending on what town you live in and how competitive the election is, what that means is if you're an unaffiliated voter, for example, or an occasional voter of the Democratic or Republican parties, the candidates may not need to communicate with you. If they have enough votes to win without your vote, why would they send a mailer? Local elections are not putting up ads on television by and large. So I think the lack of engagement often just comes down to it's not on people's radar all the time, or they don't feel like they have enough information about the candidates. I think turnout is often higher in presidential years because you literally can't escape conversation, ads, it's in the headlines, in the media, etc. Like for over a year. So everyone knows who's running, everyone has an opinion by that point. So I think if we just infused more funding into public education, we would see a boost in turnout right away. I don't know how much, but I think some.
I would love to jump in on this question if we have time for it. I also think that a lot of people under 30 are not engaged in voting in elections, and I can speak for myself. My first year at UConn, it's about 45-minute drive from campus on election day. We don't have the day off. So we are expected to go to our classes. Many students, are out of state. There's not a lot of general knowledge, and as Secretary Thomas said, education around how to get an absentee ballot, how to still vote, even if you're not able to make it to the polls, on election day. And graduating high school, many students leave 18, the legal age to vote. We're not really taught a whole lot about that, how to vote, where to vote, when to vote, how often elections occur. And I think, as she also said, I think a lot of people, when they think voting, they think it's every 4 years, it's every presidential election, but those local and state elections can often be more important than, the presidential election, a better way to express your voice.
I have to jump in again on that. Those are excellent points. This is what I lived with. We did a focus group with our interns talking about why don't you vote? Why don't your friends vote? Do you vote? And, some easy things came up. Like Elena just said, most college students were we don't even quite understand. Can we vote in our college town or our hometown? What are the laws around that? So at the Civics 101 portal, we put up it's as easy as 1, 2, 3 doc for college students specifically. We also reached out to all colleges and universities to coordinate on putting together information that they could get out to students. But I totally lost track of the other thing Elena said that was really important. But it's getting information out into the hands of people. Most people are confused, even older people. Like they started voting when they were 18 sometimes, and they don't realize election law can change all the time. So they're still basing their activities on what they learned 10, 20 years ago, and it could be quite different. Oh, and I remember I have a bill in right now that would allow 16-year-olds to pre-register or to be pre-registered when they apply for their learner's permit, because a lot of 16-year-olds are interacting with the DMV, so that when they turn 18, they are already registered, and that would remove a barrier. There are about 16 other states that have this law already. You only have to be 16 to be a poll worker in Connecticut. So I think it's a great way to engage young people early and start explaining how this all works. So if anyone wants to be civically engaged, they should send a letter to their legislator in encouraging passage of the bill.
Thank you so much. And people should know that 17-year-olds can also register to vote as long as they turn 18 before the following election cycle. But yeah, as Elena very well said, local elections can and often do have an even bigger impact on our daily lives as citizens. So that is why it's so important that we
and I have to say, I'm sorry, I'm now.
That's okay.
You've gotten into my wheelhouse. But most people don't realize that these municipal elections, like last November, there were about 20 towns where the election was decided by fewer than 20 people, and a handful where just one vote made the difference.
So not trying to take on your job, Secretary, but I was going to add that one person matters, because sometimes I've heard even adults, a lot of adults, but I'm just one person, and that won't make a difference. So that is so important that you share that as well. The other thing that Elena mentioned is that she doesn't get the day off. So I thought you were going to speak to that as well, so she can get the day off to vote. But what you've said is so important. It's making me go back to think about, even in our space, in our K-12 space, and the work that I've said even about Voice for Change, and the fact that folks had to propose projects, they had to campaign, and there was the day for the vote, all of those kinds of things. It's making me stop and think about what has been has there been any long-term impact of just that level of civic engagement? And so it's making me think we need to ask that question. What I always say can't be without you, without you, Elena. And so we always want to hear the voices of our young people to help inform our actions. And I so appreciate everything that you've said here today. It's making me stop to think about what we can do in our K-12 space as well.
Thank you so much. No, I love this. The speakers ping-ponging off of each other. That's what we love to see. But I think we are just about ready to start wrapping things up. I do have a couple of concluding questions and bookend questions for our conversation. First of all, what advice would you give someone who is seeking a leadership role in their communities?
I would say just do it, right? And right, often I know I've heard this stat as a woman where, they say that, we often feel like we need to have done the job before we do the job. And I considered not running for secretary. And I had lunch with a friend, and she said to me, I just want to make sure you decided not to run because you examined your entire life and it just doesn't make sense, versus because you have imposter syndrome or just don't think you're qualified in some way. And I had to stop and sit back, and it was the latter. I just felt like I've not been secretary, so why can I'm not allowed to run for secretary. So be confident in your own abilities and just do it. You can learn most things.
And I actively seek those opportunities as well. All right. And nothing is, to your point, too small. And so it's developing that confidence. Don't limit yourself. There are indeed infinite possibilities of what we can achieve. And you said something as well. You sat with a friend. Surround yourself with folks that you can trust, that can help to mentor you, some who can sponsor you. But that really is important as well. That voice that says you can do it. Have you thought about this? That can help you when you process your, I don't have this experience or that experience, can say, but wait a minute, you need to give this a second look. So that's also a key point for young folks, young people thinking about a leadership role, to think about those that can help to mentor them along the way.
And to add on, I would tell people that leadership isn't always standing in the front of the room and being the person with the biggest title and being the person with the loudest voice, but leadership can be just showing up, just attending, and having small impacts on your community. That can also be, classified as a leader.
And I say lead from your sphere of influence, right? And that's wherever you are.
Thank you so much. And finally, my last question would be, what advice would you give yourself, your younger self, about staying civically engaged?
I'll jump in. I think I would tell my younger self that, there's not a beginning, a middle, and an end. Civic engagement is a lifelong journey. You don't have to know all of it at once, but you should just know that there might be more out there. I have served in local government. I have served in our General Assembly and state government. And I still have a lot of questions about how our federal government is organized. So I have to recognize there's still more I can learn. And treating it like a lifelong journey makes it bite-sized. And it also just gives you the confidence so that when something happens, you already have the knowledge to make your voice heard or to try to have an impact on an issue you care about. If you're trying to learn, once you hear about something, it's probably too late.
And that, talking to my younger self, would be nothing that you're experiencing or that you're doing will be wasted. Nothing will be wasted. They all work together. So don't say, this thing over here, I'm not going to do it because I don't see the connection. It all matters. And it will all be a part of who you are in moving forward.
I would tell my younger self, even though I'm still pretty young, I would tell myself not to be discouraged by people with big egos. It exists everywhere within government structures. People with a lot of power can try to take you down and try to invalidate your opinion, but to continue to educate yourself and to continue to fight for what you believe in, no matter what anybody else says, is super important.
Can I say one thing? I think that's a really good point, Elena. And I remind people all the time, like, it doesn't matter what age you are. Like, in that classroom in the 4th grade, there was the person who paid attention to the teacher. There was the person who thought they were the star of the show. There, like, people just grow up, but the same personality types. So I think what Elena said is really important. Like, don't be turned off by one bad experience. People who are elected are not a monolith. They are not all the same. So if you run across one person who doesn't value your opinion, seek out someone else.
Thank you so much, all of you. This was wonderful, wonderful advice, wonderful conversation. And I think we're running out of time, unfortunately. So thank you, all of you, so much for joining us today. And also thank you, everybody watching, for taking your time off your day to watch these wonderful, wonderful women share their stories. But it's still Civic Learning Week. We're still halfway through the week, right? And here at the Connecticut Democracy Center, we have a couple of other offerings that I would like to share with everybody. We are offering voting rights themed tours here at Connecticut's Old State House in downtown Hartford every day through Saturday this week at 2 p.m. So if you come down at 2 p.m., we can give you a special voting rights themed tour. And you will also get a chance to see our panel exhibit, The Constitutional History of the Constitution State, which is all about the history of the Constitution of Connecticut, of course. And we are also rebroadcasting some of our more popular civic learning participation focused programming on our YouTube page and on Facebook. And we also have a small video series called What is Civics, where Connecticut students, teachers, and civics experts and government officials answer the question about the importance of civic learning. And you can also see this on our YouTube page. And please also do check out our website for more information of all things civics this week. And again, also do check out the National Civics Week website for more information about what other states are doing for Civics Week. And again, Commissioner Secretary Elena, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, thank you everybody for tuning in. We hope to catch you again for another future program, but I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day today.